Hey guys, Shah here, and today we are continuing our boss tanking guide series as we step for the first time into Halls of Atonement to look at Halkias, the Sin-Stained Goliath. Halkias is the first boss you're going to encounter in the instance and can only be engaged once your group has defeated all 3 shards. While most first bosses in the majority of instances require very little from the tank, Halkias challenges the status quo and presents the perfect test of a tank's ability to position, and I think it goes to show how much a group understands preventing negative space. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribing. It's supposed to help the channel, but more importantly, it boosts my ego. Also, let me know what bosses you guys would like to see next in the comments below. And with that out of the way, let's take a look at how this boss works, and more importantly, what you can do as a tank or even a DPS player to help make this fight clean and easy. The first time you step into this instance, or the first time you pull this boss on Mythic difficulty, you're first going to notice the Light of Atonement effect. Now, you might not register that this is actually Light of Atonement, the ability in the boss guide, but it is essentially the containment circle surrounding the boss in about a 30-yard radius. If you leave this circle, you will be feared. Simple as that. The fear is registered on a tick basis. I think it's every 8 in-game ticks. I'm not really going to go into exactly what a tick is, but it's about every 4 seconds you're going to be feared. So when going to pull this boss, especially as a tank player, make sure your DPS are ready and nearby so they can quickly get into this containment circle before the ticks start registering. The rest of the mechanics are going to be based around this Light of Atonement effect. Now, while the boss room does look quite large, you are going to be contained inside of the circle, so managing your space and moving the boss as seen fit is going to be how you're going to get this boss not only down successfully, but also in a very clean manner. There's essentially 2 phases to this boss fight, and he has 3 abilities. It's going to be Crumbling Slam and Heavy Debris in phase 1. Crumbling Slam will always target a tank, so DPS players, make sure you're not standing on top of the tank, and vice versa. Tanks, make sure you're not running on top of players who are within melee range. Heavy Debris is kind of the counterpart to Crumbling Slam, and this is going to be a ranged targeted area of effect, which does cause physical damage. Both this and Crumbling Slam cause physical damage. Heavy Debris can actually be baited by range players. I'm going to show you how you can properly bait this as range or a healer. And Halkias will typically cast these alternating. So Crumbling Slam followed by a Heave Debris, back to a Crumbling Slam, back to a Heave Debris. You're going to get anywhere between 4 and 6 casts before he goes into an intermission, which is when he'll channel an ability called Refracted Sunlight. Now, this is the rotating quad beams. This does an insane amount of damage. You get clipped by it, especially in a higher key. It does scale with Tyrannical. So during this phase, your goal is to just try to make sure you're maintaining uptime, avoiding the debris that's already on the ground and the glass shards, preventing taking extra damage, and making sure you're not getting hit by these beams. And outside of that, the fight is very simple, but again, it all comes down to how you place the debris that ends up being left from the Crumbling Slam and when Halkias decides to chuck some stuff at your range. So with the base mechanics out of the way, let's get into the breakdown. All right, Halkias is a pretty easy boss, but we're gonna go over exactly how the fight's gonna work. So first things first, I'm going to be grabbing the Stoneborn. I'm a Venthyr. Not a lot of tanks play Venthyr, but more often than not, you'll have one in your group. I think our Paladin was also, he was playing Ashen. This was a Pug, so it wasn't as coordinated as it should be, but it's just a 19 hull, so nothing too crazy. So grabbing the Stoneborn on the far right side can get tricky because it depends on where the patrol is positioned. The thing about this patrol is that it goes kind of along this path here, from north to south, or from east to west, sorry. And this brick little border here, I don't even know what, brick lining, is really weird with the Stoneborn because he tends to awkwardly try to go around it. So if you pull him and you're let's just say I was up here and I pulled him, he would actually run into this and then pull all of this. So you want to be careful of that. So what I end up doing is I wait to see where the patrol is. So if the patrol is over here, I come back this way and I tag it with a Moonfire so it runs up and over, and I can grab it with the extra action button. If the patrol for some reason, well, not for some reason, if it happens to be down this way, you want to be standing up here to tag it so it runs like that. It's not too hard, but I have once tagged it early on in the season where I tagged it and it ran up this way, pulled the patrol and these mobs. And it was just, we ended up, I think, wiping it because it was just too much and there's some casters in here. So be careful when you're grabbing the Stoneborn, but nothing too crazy. So I'm going to grab the Stoneborn here. I'm going to Door of Shadows closer to the boss and we're going to go right into it. This is a boss you'll typically hero. From my understanding, not a lot of groups get pride for this boss because people clear it with, either they clear trash There are some weeks where you can actually pull the boss with like this center trash pack that is typically right here. We decided to kill it this week by itself because I didn't have Incarnation up, and then we were missing a lot of our major cooldowns. Like we didn't have Tyrant, we didn't have Void Eruption, Wings was like still coming off a cooldown. So we opted not to pull the boss with it, though it is an option, and it actually makes this extremely efficient for both getting like an extra like 10% during the boss fight, and you're already using the Loyal Stoneborn for it. So just an option. Anyways, let's go in. So the name of the game is not having as little negative space as possible. So as soon as you pull the boss, you want to turn him around facing this alcove. And this is to bait the first Crumbling Slam as close to this wall as possible. And then what the range players need to do is that since Heave Debris only targets range, they need to position themselves somewhere along this inside or outside of the ring inside this alcove. So Sack and Pika are both positioned against the edge of the ring right there, which is perfect. And that's going to allow the debris to be just out of the way, and we're not going to have to think about it for the rest of the fight. So following this, Heave Debris comes out, it targets Pika, he moves in. This is physical damage, so Clothies need to be extremely careful when like baiting this, is if you do get clipped on a higher tyrannical key, typically you could get one shot by this Heave Debris, so just be careful. The other thing too is the Crumbling Slam will always target the tank, but just be aware of where the melee are positioned. Now melee should use their brains and shouldn't be in front of the boss anyways, but sometimes, especially when you're pulling an additional trash to this fight, if you happen to be doing that, it can get a little hectic. General rule of thumb for this dungeon, and general rule of thumb is just don't send it on the tank anyways as a melee player, but tanks also need to be aware of when this slam is coming out. Don't be standing on top of melee. So you see me here stepping back into the old slam, the glass shards that are on the ground, and this is to try to overlap it here to keep it real clean. Following this, there should be just another Heave Debris. It's going to target a range player again. We see two really good positionings here. It's two options, right? So Anthony Sacerdos decides to actually stack in between the two shards that are on the ground, and Pika, he decides to go next to the old shard. Both are viable, both are good strategies. You want to try to keep these as piled up as much as possible. That's kind of the name of the game. After this second Heave Debris, it's important for the tank to start moving out, and the range need to just be aware of this. So I'm letting them know that I'm moving. You're going to be moving away from this alcove. And the reason for that is because of his energy. His energy is at 93. At 100, he's going to cast Sinlight. We don't want another Crumbling Shard or Crumbling Slam to come out before he does Sinlight. That's kind of the name of the game here. And by moving away, it delays his timer a little bit, and he ends up not casting Slam. So we stop moving at 100 energy, and then he's going to dump and cast Sinlight. Now, Sinlight, pretty easy mechanic. You rotate with the beams. Range have a little bit harder time with it because of downtime, but make use of what you can. At the 50% mark, there is a chance for him to rotate or to swap directions. So it was going clockwise, and here actually at the 50%, he does alternate. So now it's going counterclockwise. So just be aware of that. In melee, you have a little bit of a tighter box here, but it moves slower technically when you're up here because these are all moving at the same rate, but you already knew that. And then following this, he will typically cast whatever one he didn't cast before, but because we were baiting away, we actually tricked his Crumbling Slam timer to alternate because of our kiting, and then him going into Sinlight. So it's actually going to debris to follow. This happens randomly. I've noticed that when you do kite, it can trick it, but I have had times where his spell queuing just is really wacky. So he is going to Heave Debris. As you notice, Sacerdos and Pika both stack along the edge next to the old shards, which is, again, perfect positioning by them. And they're going to, so they bait it out there and then they move to the right. And this positioning is good too, because now they're going to be baiting in between the two old shards. My thought process here is to try to get back over here to keep these shards up as grouped up as possible. But because they didn't move this way, I didn't want to now slam them and put them in a tight corner. So I end up just positioning myself here kind of out of the way. I bait the slam. You move off to the left typically, or away from where, or towards the way you want to go. So I know that during the next Sinlight, I want to be out in this open. So I'm going to go left, and then the next slam, I'm going to try to stack it up, and then we're going to go back out left again. So like I mentioned before, Pika and Sack are doing a great job. Range should always try to bait next to old shards, whether it's in melee or in range. Sack moves out, Pika moves in, and then we're going to get one more crumbling slime here. And I'm going to try to get it as overlapped as possible. And then we're going to move again out this way into the clear path. And then once you start moving a little bit here, the debris is going to come out. It's going to be the 5th cast, and then he's going to go right into Sin Light. So his energy works really weird in the phase 2 and the later phase of the fight, where he'll hit 100 energy, but it still spell queues like the heap debris first. So you want to make sure you're just being aware of that. So I'm making sure I'm not moving before the heap debris goes out, so they can bait into this back corner here where all the glass shards are. And then I'm moving him out to have enough room for the melee to be able to swing around. So in a perfect world, you have no glass shards inside of the circle. Right here, we have a little bit of overlap, but it's not going to be that big of a deal because a lot of times range will just move into melee to get better uptime and have an easier time moving around the circle. But that's pretty much the fight. He typically doesn't do 3 unless you're doing like a high tyrannical or your damage is really, really low. So that's pretty much the fight. Again, it's all about preventing that negative space, making sure you're stacking things up. It's good to get in the practice of baiting certain mechanics, especially as like a range player. But as a tank, being aware of your positioning and how it's going to affect other people. So that's why I really like this fight. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it's an interesting fight. No one really struggles with this fight, but I've seen some crazy, ridiculous pug groups that this room is like an absolute mess by the end. It's like a minefield. So that's pretty much that. So we're gonna just cue the outro. And that basically sums it up. If you guys do have any questions or concerns, let me know in the comment section below. If this sort of content interests you, please consider subscribing. It's no cost to you, and you'll get notified when I post new content. Also, I recently started a Discord server for the channel where you can get in touch with me and like-minded people. The link will be in the description below. Anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you're all staying healthy, happy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.